In section 2.5, we're talking about interpreting graphs and looking at things that are wrong with some graphs. Okay, so one thing you can do is make graphs misleading, so it actually might show you what you want it to show and not what's actually the truth. So a lot of times this happens when you have frequency scales that don't start at 0, and it makes the differences between the values of the different categories much larger than they actually are. And a lot of times when you use symbols rather than bars, you end up changing things in 2 dimensions, both the length, the width of it, and the height, in order to keep the proportion correct for that symbol that you're using. I have examples of these as we go through here. And just using unequal bar widths. Okay, so here's an example of a scale. It could be that it's not starting at 0. If you notice, there's 10 catchers here that they're showing, but if there's 21 outfielders, you should actually have this bar be more than twice as long as this one, and you can tell that that's not quite the case. So if we fix this, it actually ends up making it look like this. Okay? So the problem here is either they didn't even use an appropriate scale, or their scales didn't even start at 0, which makes it look deceiving like what we had in this case here. Okay, here's another example of a scale not starting at 0. They start here at 13. So it looks like the difference between the highest total effective tax rate for the middle class, which is, this is the middle 20%, so the middle fifth of all Americans, had a large drop in it. Okay, it went from 19.2% for the effective tax rate down to 13.8%. Okay, so it looks like the middle class is actually enjoying this large tax break, but if you put it on a scale where it starts at 0, okay, you notice that here's your middle 20%, right? It really doesn't look that much of a drop, but also all of these, everyone except the 20%, have that same drop in their tax rate. Okay, so in this case, you had 2 problems with that original graph. One problem being they didn't start the scale at 0. The other is they were only showing one of the graphs and if you would look for the link for where that graph goes from, the middle 20% looked like they were enjoying this tax break, but actually it was for almost everyone except the top 20%. So they didn't actually even tell the whole story. They only gave one graph when they should have been giving all of the graphs. Okay. This one, it has no scale on it. Also, I have no idea what they're even trying to show. But you notice, though, as they increase from the previous iPad to the new iPad, it has to grow in both the height, because it's more of something, and to keep it proportional, they actually make the width larger. So since it's growing in 2 dimensions, it's not just that much higher, it's also that much wider. So it makes it look like it was a lot difference in whatever it is that they're measuring between the previous iPad and the new iPad. Okay. With the computer, there's been all kinds of new ways to make graphs, so we're going to switch over and look at some of these. Okay, here's a website that actually talks about the State of the Union, and with all the texting and emailing and stuff that goes out, you now can make graphs with words. Okay, so if you go through and you kind of read this page, you can see the bigger the word, the more often it was used, and I think how high up it is how often it was used, and when it was used it is. Okay, and you can actually go through and you could look at this for every single State of the Union address that was given. So if I click down here, this is the one for Obama when he gave it January 28th of 2014. If I click down to this one, this is McKinley in January 28th, December 6th of 1897. Okay, and they give you some other information, but it's kind of neat because you can see how words change throughout the years. Okay, and then the same site has another graph here of about frequency of words that were used. So if I switch over to it, like you can compare 2 words like justice with equality, okay, and it shows you the frequency, how often were these words used during different time periods in the State of the Union addresses. So that's just a fun website that makes interesting graphs. Okay. There's also a video by Hans Roslings, I'm not exactly sure how you say his name, about the joy of stats, and I'm not going to play it for you here, but you can play it on your own, and you can see how he actually ends up with lots of variables when he's making his graph. His graph is actually a scatter plot that we haven't talked about yet, but you get the idea of how you can incorporate more than just 1 or 2 variables into a graph. Okay, and because of the computer, he's actually able to do that. Okay, I just think this one's interesting about football games. and how things happen. So they just did a rectangle, each frame is 1%. They did do some rounding because of this 9.4%, but we only have 9 frames and doesn't go into here. But you can see playing time is very little part of the game, and most of it is just all the standing around. So it's similar to a pie chart in a way, except it's using a rectangle instead. Okay, there's 2 websites. One's called Google Trends, and you can actually type in like anything you want, right? So like if we choose, let's say LeBron James, okay, it'll show me right here like how, like the amount of times or the interest of in that name over time. So I'm guessing this might be when he switched from playing from the Cleveland and went down to Miami when everyone would have been looking it up. And I'm not exactly sure what the 100 stands for. You'd have to read the page a little bit. Okay, and you have some other things that shows you here where it is that it's happening. Okay, you can even type in your name. So if I search my name, you have different choices, but we'll just do search my name in it. Okay, and it shows me like over time, right? This is only 2005. It shows me how often people have that name, okay, or how they actually more of a Google thing, okay. And these are different things, so it explains like these different news events that happens if they have them also. This one won't go back any further than 2005. Another one is a Wolfram Alpha site, so like I can do the same thing here. Let's just try my name on this one. Okay, and if I search, okay, and we're doing it as my given name, and then you can see this goes all the way back to 1880, and it's searching it as a female given name, okay. And it shows you its popularity. I actually was born in 1964 when it was at its height of popularity. Okay. You can, I mean, I could have searched Elizabeth and that kind of thing also. So like even in here, if we try to do LeBron James in here, oops. Okay, we'll get the same idea. Okay. So this is, oops. I don't really get a graph for this part, right? About him, and here's the graph, and this is the Wikipedia page hits history. And again, we still right here's that 2010 and the other time. So you do have some graphs, but it's tied to Wikipedia, not Google searches. So that's just some things that they have out on the internet now that you can look at that gives you fun statistics about different things.